All right, guys, welcome back. We're now in part 3, and this is my series on the conjugate method, and hopefully giving you guys some really practical tips on how to implement this for your own training. So firstly, thanks for making it onto my channel. If you have any questions or comments, pop them down below. And if you'd like to work with me on your own strength and physique goals, there's a link in the description. So let's get straight onto this. Now, yesterday I covered the dynamic effort method and the way that I typically do that for guys roughly in that intermediate sort of stage and how to get them to advanced. It's a little bit different from what is commonly known and done via sort of traditional West Side methods. And I think it's more applicable. I have more results and more luck with that method for the clients that I work with. So now we're looking at the maximal effort method, and let's have a look. So now, by doing your main lifts with the high volume and relatively light percentages, which I described in the dynamic effort method, you still need to train the body to actually produce maximal force. So you need to have the ability to actually handle heavy weights. So with regards to sort of yesterday's video on the dynamic effort method, you're not handling weights which are that heavy. So with a lot of my programs, I tend to do either very, very maximal work or very light work. And you'll see that in the repetition effort method, which is tomorrow. So I think you need both. I don't really like that middle ground very much. You know, the classic sort of 3x5, 5x5 kind of routines. I don't like that middle ground. It's very, very tiring and it tends to wear you down. So anyway, don't want to get into that because there'll be somebody in the comments wanting to argue. So, but basically, I quite like, you know, single repetition work. So what that does is it causes the nervous system to get better at firing, and also it strengthens your ligaments. Now, this maximal effort method, it's useful. The level of usefulness depends on your biology. So a lot of people say it's, you know, maximal effort is pointless or dynamic effort is pointless. But the thing is, it depends on you, right? So maximal effort for me was never really that vital because I was a very explosive lifter. So my peak strength was what I could peak off a high set of reps was way higher than what you'd normally think. Like I peaked a 180 bench off 140 for 7 or 8 reps, I think it was. So my one repetition my max strength was always way higher than what I did for reps. So, and I peaked a 230 squat off a 170 for 8 set of squats the week before. So my maximal level of strength, it was always just genetically quite high. Like I really needed to work the repetitions. The repetitions were great for me. And looking back on my sort of 20 plus years of lifting now, I've gone on about the value of repetition work many times. But looking back now, it's like I can see actually that's the truth. The truth is that having worked with a lot of people now, different people just need different things. I needed more repetition work because that plugged the gaps that were in my particular biology. So maximal effort, it's part of the program. And I think you should, you know, if you're going to go and do this, I think you should still do it. But it's a case of it'll be more or less useful depending on what your particular biology is. So how explosive you are, essentially. So moving on now, what to max out. So basically, since we don't want to use the actual lift regularly, so if you're doing squats on your dynamic effort, you know, day, and if you're doing deadlifts on that and bench on that, you don't just want to carry on benching and squatting and deadlifting on your max effort day. In fact, that's the whole reason why you're moving to this program. You want, because you stalled on the, you know, the regular method. So we need variety. We need variety to avoid overuse injuries, again, which is why you're watching this video in the first place. So overuse injuries of like ligaments and movement patterns. So we can take this as an opportunity to use weak point training. So that is what the next few slides are going to focus on. And I'll give you some of my sort of personal experience on what I did over the years when I chose these types of methods, because this sort of max effort style is very much what I used in the tactician program as well. It's what I used to achieve some of my best lifts back in the day. So generally what you want to, here's my advice for you guys. Pick roughly 3 to 6 variations of each lift. And that's what I want you to sort of focus on. So for the bench, it's going to be 6 because you do the bench or like a press, it's going to be 6. You do the press every week. Now, with regards to squat and deadlift, they only need 3 each because they're typically trained together. You're not going to max out on a squat and a deadlift in the same week. So 3 each of squat and deadlift, 6 variations of the bench. or a press, depending on what you're interested in doing. If you're interested in pressing overhead, then you might pick different ones. But I'm going to focus on the bench today because that's kind of my thing. So bench variations, this is what I found to be the most useful when I was lifting, when I lifted mostly raw. I did dabble in a bit of equipped lifting, but I mostly lifted raw. Close grip bench was the numero uno movement for me. Like it was unparalleled. Like my close grip bench was about 10% within my regular bench consistently every single time. So that was the biggest indicator I had for if my bench was going to go up or not. If my close grip moved up, then my bench moved up. It was really that simple. Other one that I enjoyed and I did quite a lot was the feet up bench press. So I would bench and my knees would be up. So as long as I had a good sort of stable bench, that worked quite well. It just removed a leg drive. And I was a very leg drive sort of lifter. So that was quite a good variation for me. Third one was slingshot bench. I used slingshot a lot back in the day. I've only recently started using it again. I quite enjoy it. And it did a lot for my bench press. I imagine because in the grand scheme of things, I was probably a lighter lifter. So I always competed in either 83 or, well, what was 82.5 kilo category when I first started lifting, or the 90 kilo category, what is now the 93 kilo category. So as a result, I think what the slingshot enabled me to do was handle bigger weights, which I needed to because my frame wasn't like that big. I wasn't like a 200-pound, well, I mean, I wasn't like a 240, 250-pound guy. At my biggest, I was about 220, I think. So yeah, slingshot worked quite well for me because it provided a good degree of overload while still working through a full range. It just let me handle heavier weights, and not crazy heavy either, but it just let me handle heavy weights. So that was that. The next one was floor press. I found that could be quite useful. It was a good movement. It was fairly closely correlated to close grip bench, so I quite liked it. Easy to set up, easy to go to failure on. You can fail on a floor press pretty easily. And also I used the 1 or 2 board bench press. That was back when I used to take actual wooden boards with me to the gym, pain in the butt. And also I quite like the bench press against bands. I quite like band work. I'm a big fan of it, particularly for raw lifters, but as long as it's bands where you're pressing against the band. What I don't like, and I don't find any value in, is the reverse bands. I just think it's pointless. And what I would also do is every now and again, if I felt beat up, I would do dumbbell bench. I did that in a couple of different ways. It would either be dumbbells for time. So I would pick some dumbbells and do them for like a minute or 2 minutes or 3 minutes, or I would just try and get a rep record, So I actually quite enjoy dumbbell benching if I've got some spotters and whatnot. It's one of those where you don't want the dumbbell to fall on your face or anything. So yeah, dumbbell was quite good for recovery weeks. I didn't like the incline bench. I always found that to be quite injurious. I do it now, but I do it for repetition work. So for sets of 8, I don't do it. I don't do it regularly for singles. I just found it could be quite injurious on the shoulders, on the pecs, stuff like that. So I was always getting little niggles from the incline press. So not a massive fan for max effort work. But those are mine. Like, you guys need to decide on what your best sort of lifts are going to be, and you don't have to set the stall like today. You can just go through the 6 weeks and just pick different ones as you feel like. But my point is just have enough variation. If you're at the point where you've got that 2-plater side bench and you're kind of stuck, then yeah, go for it, give it a try, why not? But you don't have to set the stall now for the next 6 weeks. You can just go through the weeks and then pick variations week by week as you feel like. So next up is squat variations. And since you need less squat variations, I'm going to talk you through a list of some ones that I did back in the day, and I still do, but ones which ultimately have pretty good carryover. So the high bar squat was my premier lift every single time. High bar had a direct correlation to low bar for me, so I trained the hell out of that. I loved it. I also did a lot of pause squats. They were quite good. Something I've been doing more recently is a low box squat. So something which puts me way below parallel. That's quite helpful. And again, with squats, I quite like bands. So either of those could be, you could attach a band onto that. Just make sure the band is attached properly so there's some tension at the bottom and you're not just getting a weird sort of slowing effect halfway up. If you've got access to a Hatfield bar, the safety squat bar, then use the safety squat bar or whatever, if that's available. Front squat, not a massive fan of, unless you've got a special harness. So I would go with, if you've got a harness, great. If not, front squat's a bit awkward because you're more limited by what you can hold onto your shoulders. I have done some reasonably heavy front squats back in the day, but it's just not a very comfortable exercise to do. So you're never limited by what you can squat. You're always limited by what you can hold on your shoulders. So not a massive fan of that. With regards to deadlift variations, probably my absolute all-time favorite one was the rack pull below the knees. Yeah. I quite like trap bar deadlifts when I had access to them. They're more common to find in gyms now, but back when I was competing, you couldn't find a trap bar for anything really. Deficit deadlifts was also a big one for me. I love deficit deadlifts, and I was quite strong at them, probably because I was quite a back dominant lifter. And again, deadlifts against bands. I think they provide a good amount of a nice varied stress. I've put an honorable mention in here for rack pull above knees. I'm not a massive fan of this movement at this level. So if you're still at the level where your deadlift is maybe, I don't know, 4 plates aside, I don't think it's that useful. I think it's something which is a bit more advanced, and you might want to use it a little bit later on. It's a fine movement. It's just a case of when is it appropriate. And I probably think at this level, it's probably not that appropriate for the audience that I'm speaking to. Anyway, moving on. In terms of frequency, yeah, in general, you want to be doing this about once a week. Bench press, once a week. Or again, like I said at the beginning, if your preferred press is an overhead press, that's fine. And squat or deadlift once a week. Hence, we have only 3 of each. And again, if you want to do something like alpha descent and you want to really focus on a deadlift, then fine, pick 6 variations and go nuts, and then don't squat at all. But it depends, what you're into. Nothing wrong with that at all. And I want to just put in here a special mention for pull-ups and chin-ups. So I also max out on pull-ups, chin-ups, and neutral grip pull-ups, and I just rotate those across the weeks. It's quite fun, and I quite like it. Just be careful, warm up carefully. But I find it's quite positive. It feels good doing it. Quite positive for overall pulling strength. So it's something that I've been experimenting with, and it doesn't impede recovery that much. So far, let's just sort of summarize where we're at across these 3 videos. So far, we've got, in a given week, we've got dynamic effort, which is high volume work done in a very close variation to the lift you're trying to improve. So if you're trying to improve the squat, you might be doing an actual squat, or you might be doing a squat to a box or a squat against bands. It's very, very, very close variations. For the maximal effort, which we've just discussed, it's low volume, but very high intensity, so a lot of weight on the bar. And that work is mostly done to address weak points. Okay, so it's done in lifts that you're typically weaker at. And that inherent in that is a degree of safety, because if you bench, 140 kilos and your close grip bench is 120, well, that's inherently less weight. So it's probably a bit more of a margin for safety. Also, you're probably not as used to doing it for singles, so it's less it's safe for that reason too. Now, the next video, which I'm going to release tomorrow, is maybe tomorrow, maybe the day after. The next is the bulk of the program. So I do discuss the dynamic effort first, the maximal effort second, but the repetition effort is really the bulk of your program. The repetition effort is probably 60 to 70% of the program, of how much time you spend in the gym. The dynamic effort and the maximal effort are smaller amounts. It's just that this method is typified via the different stresses. So you have to discuss dynamic effort, maximal effort, and repetition effort. But the reality is, what I'll be discussing in the next video is the majority of the program. It's just that when people think conjugate, they think max effort, dynamic effort. But anyway, I hope you found this useful. I've been trying to be as practical as possible, and yeah, the feedback on the dynamic effort video was really good. So let me know what you guys are thinking with this one, and the series will continue. And I'll probably do a final video on how to put this together in a work week as well, because I think that's quite useful. Above and beyond the typical West Side 4 days a week, I think there's different ways to organize and structure this as well. All right, so if you're not already subscribed, go ahead and subscribe. If you want to sort of have some coaching for me, and great, sign up for a few months. Let's see what we can do together, get you some results, and that'll be good to be good to work with you on that. But other than that, I will call it there, and I'll speak to you guys in the next one.